everyone. I'm glad to see you guys again for another lesson for our look at Holy Week, our Lent Bible study virtual. I hope that you all have had a blessed week so far and are looking forward to today's lesson. To do a little quick recap, during the first week we looked at Sunday, God's signs of change that are coming to the world and how God engages with us in different times in our lives in which we might be able to encounter change and signs that maybe God's present in ways that we don't expect or we might expect. On, of course, Monday, we looked at curses and blessings with the fig tree and the temple. Tuesday, we looked at some questions and lessons when it comes to Jesus and his encounter with coming back to the temple, teaching his disciples the lesson of the fig tree, considering what they were seeing and kind of seeing what leadership is about and what faithfulness is actually about. On Wednesday, we looked at Peter's betrayal mostly, the other side of the coin, and what kind of might drive us away from God in those situations and what lessons we can take away. That sometimes there are times that we feel personally like we need to distance ourselves, we have that internal conflict. We might see things and we might think, oh, this is not going in a good direction. And sometimes it's easy for us to want to find people who agree with us, even if we are still being challenged by our own perceptions. We easily try to look for comfort in our lives. Since we looked at Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, you can guess what today's lesson's going to be. That's right. Today we're going to be looking at Maundy Thursday. And now we kind of get back into the week where we kind of have a clear idea as to when certain events did happen. Because we know that during Maundy Thursday, we encounter the Lord's Supper. His disciples go and get to prepare the place in which they're going to have the Passover meal. And afterwards, we know that they're going to go to the garden where Jesus will be betrayed. But before we get into today's lesson and looking at the text directly to see what kind of lessons might be speaking to us when it comes to the events of Maundy Thursday, let's do a quick little recap as to how the virtual Bible study works. As you probably can guess, with in-person Bible study, you have the benefit of being able to talk with peers, being in a group setting, being able to learn, discuss, reading the text, being able to share personal experiences, thoughts about what you might be hearing, or certain words that might be standing out to you, that the Spirit might be leading you to, or even encountering questions that you may have not noticed before. In the virtual Bible study, you might have some situation which is similar, especially if you're able to watch with family or friends. You may be able to reflect with them about passages, looking at scripture for yourselves and deciding what is helpful and what may be speaking to you in a family situation. Or even if you're in a place where you have someone around that you feel comfortable having these lessons with, you may be able to share some thoughts and ideas. If you're a person who's living on your own and enjoying watching this on your own to do your own studies, there's no shame in that. In fact, I'd say that the Spirit is still moving within you and encouraging you to probably reflect in different ways. Some ways may be in journaling, sketching, approaching with prayer, poetry, song. There's many ways in which we engage with the text and lessons, and we can reflect on the questions towards the end of this video in those safe spaces, being able to engage with God, being able to discern with reading and text, and just having that space to reflect, to memorize, to encounter your own events where the text may be leading to you personally and where you feel like the Spirit may be calling you. And of course, if you still want someone to talk to, but there's not a person around, you can always approach God with prayer. You can always engage with God's very Spirit, who's still dwelling within you, and being able to reflect with God in prayer. Where are you talking with me? What is coming to mind with me? Why am I remembering this? Well, how is this important? How does this relate? How does this connect? And where can I see you involved in my daily lives each day? In terms of talking to God. So those are a few ways in which you can engage with the virtual Bible study, and I hope that it's a helpful experience for you all. Now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at Maundy Thursday. When it comes to the text, a lot of it is pretty much well known, although how you sometimes approach Maundy Thursday can vary, especially when it comes to traditions. I know that growing up as a kid, I would always kind of consider that Maundy Thursday, we have, of course, not only the supper that gets mentioned, the celebration, the Jesus revealing that he's going to be betrayed, but there's also those other little things that come up. We know the significance of course, the meal. The sign and the sacrament that comes from it. That Jesus breaks the bread and gives the cup to his disciples to drink so that we might be able to find community, connectedness, and also forgiveness. But I kind of wonder why we might have those perceptions when it comes to the Last Supper. And it may help to look at, of course, the Gospel of Matthew for that. Although I'm going to start with Mark first in terms of preparation, because Matthew has just a slight variation even though they're both the same. However, Mark also has some variation as to how it begins. So for looking at the text for Mark, it's on chapter 14, starting at 22. Nope, I'll say starting at 12. So here's the Gospel of Mark, chapter 14, starting at verse 12. On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, when it was customary to sacrifice the Passover lamb, Jesus' disciples asked him, "Where do you want us to go and make preparations for you to eat the Passover?" So he sent two of his disciples, telling them, "Go into the city. A man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him. Say to the owner of the house he enters, 'The teacher says, where is my guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' He will show you a large room upstairs, furnished and ready. Make preparations for us there." Then his disciples left, went into the city, and found things just as Jesus had told them, so they prepared the Passover. When evening came, Jesus arrived with his 12 disciples. While they were reclining at the table and eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me." They were saddened, and one by one they said to him, "Surely you don't mean me." "It is one of the 12, he replied, "the one who dips bread into the bowl with me. The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him. But woe to the man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born." While they were eating, Jesus took the bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take this. This is my body." Then he took the cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, and they all drank from it. "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many." He said to them, "Truly I tell you, I will not drink again from the fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it anew in the kingdom of God." When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. And that is the reading of the Gospel of Mark from chapter 14, starting verse 12 to 26. As I had mentioned before, how it starts is very interesting because they specify, much like the riding into Jerusalem, where the disciples must go to find certain events that will take place to help be a sign that things are coming and changing in the world, that God provides for them. And they merely just need to take that chance to ask, to reflect, and to wonder. It's interesting to see the parallel of the entrance into the Jerusalem being repeated again with the preparation for the Lord's Supper. Lord's Supper. Now I'm going to read you Matthew's version of it, which I kind of found a bit interesting when it came to explaining the preparation because it was a bit more ambiguous. It kind of explains that the disciples will find a person and that person will guide them simply to where they need to go. It doesn't explain much like in clarity that they would find a man carrying a jar and that they simply needed, after greeting him, to follow him to their destination. It also doesn't explain that this place will be in the upstairs room, much like it does in the Gospel of Mark. But I will go ahead and read it for your convenience so that you can see. And of course, you might also notice where the passage of where we get our theology of forgiveness, being a part of the major element for the Lord's Supper, even in our practice today, can come into play. So here's now the Gospel of Matthew's version of the Last Supper. Matthew 26, starting at verse 17. On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Where do you want us to make preparation for you to eat the Passover?" He replied, "Go into the city to a certain man and tell him, 'The teacher says, my appointed time is near. I'm going to celebrate the Passover with my disciples at your house.'" So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them and prepared the Passover. When evening came, Jesus was reclining at the table with the 12, and while they were eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." They were very sad and began to say to him, one after another, "Surely you don't mean me, Lord." Jesus replied, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him. But woe to the man who betrayed the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born." Then Judas, the one who betrayed him, said, "Surely you don't mean me, Rabbi." Jesus answered, "You have said so." While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body." Then he took the cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. When it comes to the Lord's Supper, we do often associate the importance of forgiveness. Even though we share the element and remember that we are connected as a family of faith because of the sacrifice that Jesus makes, making the sacrament, the supper, significant. It doesn't only hold the disciples together in their faith, in their belief that God will provide for them, but also the importance that even when we do have our moments, much like Jesus even discussing with Judas about the betrayal, even passively, Jesus is willing to acknowledge the betrayal and still chooses to forgive. Jesus still offers him the same cup and the same bread so that he might be just as enabled to be forgiven as the rest of the disciples of all their sins, as much as it affects all of us as Christians today who continue to take this sacrament. It's so easy for us to get caught up into those little quarrels that we sometimes might find. Those little debates, those moments that it's so easy for us, much like last week, to say, okay, we are having a hard time seeing eye to eye. Much like Judas had a hard time probably being in the same place, in the same space with the rest of the disciples, seeing things that he knew would probably lead to a lot of heartache and pain. That he went to go find someone who would agree with him, could probably consider the same things that he was, and to find connections in other places. And yet the supper gives an opportunity that even when we have our differences, our debates, our different theologies, we all are called to consider being humble at the Lord's table, remembering that we all serve the same Lord, that we all honor and respect the same God, and that we're all family, even though we have our quirks, we have our differences, we have our highs and we have our lows. We all come to seek forgiveness whenever we have sinned against God, and that God will care and treat us equally at his table. I'm trying to think what made Luke special. Because many of them, like I said, kind of do share some similar themes when it comes to the preparation. Ah, yes. The interesting thing about Luke's gospel version of describing the Last Supper is that after the cup's been passed around, Jesus actually waits till after the sacrament's been given to be able to acknowledge that there will be probably a betrayal, that someone was not going to agree with them. But instead of like Luke or Matthew and Mark, which is a pity, a woe to the one who betrays the Son of Man, that's pretty much only where Luke ends that statement. Not saying it wasn't better for him not to have been born at all, but simply just saying that it's a pity, it's a woe, it's a loss. Which also then begins a new dispute that goes into it. Since the pattern is a little bit reversed in this case. The disciples end up having a discussion after hearing this. And here's how it goes. This is Luke chapter 22, starting at verse 42. The disciples also arose, a dispute also arose among them, as which of them was considered to be the greatest. Jesus said to them, "The King of the Gentiles lords it over them, and those who execute authority over them call themselves benefactors. But you are not to be like that. Instead, the greatest among you shall be like the youngest, and the one who rules like the one who serves. For who is greater, the one who sits at the table or the one who serves? Is it not the one who is at the table? But I am among you as one who serves. You are those who have stood by me in my trials, and I confirm on you a kingdom, just as my Father confirmed one on me, so that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom and sit on thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to shaft all of you as wheat. But I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. Now we're going into the denial of Peter. But I will continue with it. Luke 33. Chapter 22, starting at verse 33. But he replied, Lord, I am ready to go with you to prison and to death. Jesus answered, I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you will deny 3 times that you know me. Then Jesus asked them, when I send you without purse, bag, or sandal, did you not lack anything? Nothing, they answered. He said to them, now if you have a purse, take it, and also a bag, and if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. It is written, and he was numbered with the transgressors. And I tell you that this must be fulfilled in me. Yes, when what is written about me is reaching its fulfillment. The disciple said, see, Lord, here there are 2 swords. That is enough, he replied. And of course, Luke is unique again in terms of speaking in that way, letting the disciples know that things are about to change and it's okay for them to start preparing for themselves, thinking about themselves and considering the ways in which life will go. Where if you look at Mark and Matthew's gospel, the betrayal of Peter is a little bit different and probably a little bit more simplified. I'll go ahead and read from Matthew's chapter 26, starting at verse 31. Then Jesus told them, this very night you will all fall away on account of me, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you in Galilee. Peter replied, even if all falls away on account of you, I never will. Truly I tell you, Jesus answered, this very night before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. But Peter declared, even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you. And all the other disciples said the same. It's kind of food for thought, isn't it? That the fulfillment is being told in different ways. That it is written that the shepherd would be struck down and the sheep would be scattered. In both Matthew and in Mark's gospel. Yet in Luke's gospel, the disciples are encouraged to consider themselves, because it's also written that way. I'm going to take a minute to pause and reflect on those times. What it might have been like to be like Peter in those situations. Or even a disciple at the table and hearing this. Being told while seeing that God is again present, showing God signs of providing in the midst of them with having this space, then being able to come together to have a meal and to be told that there's going to be someone who's going to betray the person that they've admired the most, that they look up to, that they've been learning from and consider a great teacher, a great mentor, someone who's a good friend to them. Knowing that they are going to lose him soon is hard to imagine. Being given then an opportunity to break bread, to enjoy a meal, and probably understanding that this is something significant, but also at the same time feeling like I'm just sharing a food. Why does this moment feel so much more tense? To then having a question as to, well, again, who is really in a place of authority? Where's something good? Where is the person who will stand up? That they have their debates, and Jesus tells them not to worry about the debates. Don't think of things like the world. And at the same time, Peter's like, I don't want to deny. I'm not going to deny. Again, he's trying to be the better disciple and how they perceive things, that they will follow Jesus to the end. And at the same time, Jesus is being real, letting them know that it's inevitable, or it's just a part of our human nature to be prepared for when life encounters change. We have that natural instinct to preserve ourselves. And he's letting him know that it's okay, because it's also written. God still uses those moments of what we may see as weakness, moments when we may feel like we are having a hard time being faithful, to create space that can be safe, that can still be accepted, and that God can still use to show God's glory. It's really something to think about. That forgiveness takes time, patience, and also acknowledging the truth, even when truth is hard. There are times when we might not feel great, that there are times that we might not be able to follow faithfully, that there might be times that we question and we doubt, times that we normally have fear, and times maybe even when we are together, we might still feel distance. And God still fills in those cracks, those gaps, letting there be safe space. Not only during the sacrament, but just in part of the disciples' natural lives. That even after eating, they're still connected by faith. They're still connected because of what the Lord has provided for them in the life of Jesus. Using all these things that are going to take place. And it gets even richer still when they go into the garden after singing a hymn to Mount Olive. And there is so much into this reading. So I'm going to start with Matthew, going on to from chapter 26, starting at verse 36, in Gethsemane. Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch for me." Going a little further, he fell on his face to the ground and prayed, "Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. "Couldn't you men keep watch for me for 1 hour?" he asked Peter. "Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." He went a second time and prayed, "My Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done." Then he came back, and again he found them sleeping because their eyes were so heavy. So he left them and went away once more and prayed a third time, saying the same thing. Then he returned to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come, and the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let's go. Here comes my betrayer." In Mark's Gospel, it reads pretty much the same, with the prayers in Gethsemane being 3 times, but it doesn't go into quite the same depth. Only the first prayer is actually mentioned, and it goes like this. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will." And then he comes back and he sees Simon, and of course he addresses them while they're sleeping. And then he goes and prays, and then he comes back and he does the same, but it doesn't go into explaining the prayer, which is interesting. In the Gospel of John, though, not much is quite written quite as chronologically, and I say that word with care, when it comes to the other three Gospels, when it comes to Holy Week. But it sheds a different kind of light as to what kind of prayers those prayers could be, the three prayers that Jesus did pray. And it starts off on John 17, chapter 17. The first prayer being Jesus prays to be glorified. The second prayer is Jesus prays for his disciples. And the last prayer is Jesus prays for all believers before he's arrested. I'm going to start with John chapter 16, the verse pretty much before chapter 17. So that's 33. John chapter 16, starting at verse 33. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Jesus prays to be glorified. After Jesus said this, he looked to the heavens and prayed, Father, the hour has come. Glorify your Son, so that your Son may glorify you. For you have granted him authority over all people, that he might give everlasting life to all those who have given him. Now this is eternal life, that they know you and only trust God and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. I have brought you glory on earth by finishing the work you gave me to do. And now, Father, glorify me in your presence with the glory I had with you before the world began. The second prayer, Jesus prays for his disciples. Chapter 17, verse 6. I have revealed you to those whom you have given me out of the world. They were yours, and you gave them to me, and they have obeyed your word. Now they know that everything you have given me comes from you, for I gave them the words you gave me, and they accepted them. They knew who certainly They knew with certainty that I came from you, and they believed that you sent me. I pray for them. I am not praying for the world, but for those you have given me, for they are yours, and all I have is yours, and all you have is mine. The glory has come to me through them. I will remain in the world no longer, but they are still in the world, and I am coming to you. Holy Father, protect them by the power of your name, the name you gave me, so that they may be one, as we are one. While I was there with them, I protected them and kept them safe by that name you gave me. None has been lost except the one doomed to destruction, so the scriptures would be fulfilled. I am coming to you now, but I will say these things while I am still in the world, so that they may have the full measure of my joy within them. I have given them the word, and the world has hated them. For they are not of the world anymore, and I am of They are not of the world anymore, that I am of the world. My prayer is not that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one. They are not of the world, even as I am not of it. Sanctify them by the truth. Your word is true. As you sent me into the world, I have sent them into the world. For them I sacrifice myself, and they to me be truly that they too may be truly sanctified. For them I sanctify that they may okay. As you guys can tell, I'm dyslexic, so I do have my moments, and I hope that you all have peace with me when it comes to this. And then the last prayer. My prayer is not for them alone. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one. Father, just as you are in me and I am in you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory that you have given me, that they may be one as we are one. In them and in them and you in me, so they may be brought to complete unity. Then the world will know that you sent me and have loved them ever as you have loved me. Father, I want those who have given me to be with me where I am and to see my glory, the glory you have given me because you loved me before the creation of the world. Righteous Father, though the world does not know you, I know you, and they know that you have sent me. I have made you known to them and will continue to make you known, in order that the love you have for me may be in them, and that I myself may be in them. And that ends John's Gospel's reading concerning Jesus' 3 prayers before John chapter 18 with Jesus' arrest. Unfortunately, when it comes to John, he is definitely very theological. So his words are deep, very thought-provoking, and sometimes a bit of a tongue twister as a result. But that is a blessing sometimes, that it challenges us to stop, to think, and to consider what is written and how it's written when it comes to the Gospel of John. It's interesting to then see those 3 events, those different ways in which we consider the way that Jesus must have prayed that evening. That he probably prayed for God's glory, that he prayed for his disciples, that he prays for us as followers, and that even though he was likely the same as in that moment in space with the breaking of the bread and the cup, like his disciples may have felt very uneasy, bothered by Jesus again explaining that his death is coming, to still feel that fear, to still say, even after looking at the disciples, that the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. It's normal for Jesus to still feel that moment that we might feel as humans, knowing that our end might be coming. That even if we can kind of even see signs of it, we may feel uncomfortable with the idea of death. And even if we might not see the signs and we just encounter losses in our lives, it still does bother us. It still reminds us of, as humans, we encounter our mortality. And the promise in the sacraments is God's gift of forgiveness and an opportunity to everlasting life. The Spirit again is willing. Jesus wants to see God's word meaningful and full, and God's glory to be reigning forever. But in our condition as being humans, we may feel that we have our weaknesses, our moments of weakness, our need for self-preservation, much like the disciples. And Jesus even, like I said, when they were having the supper, encouraged the disciples to be okay with the fact that they are going to want to preserve themselves, to preserve their lives. Because In Matthew's gospel, we had seen that Jesus promised that when he comes back, Peter will hopefully come back and he'll encourage his brothers to be faithful, to be able to follow Jesus when Jesus comes back with resurrection. But that comes on Sunday. I know that this is a longer video, but like I said, Maundy Thursday is so rich, even though it seems so simple, with the meal, the garden, and the inevitable betrayal. So I'm going to go ahead and read Matthew's account of Jesus' arrest, and then I'll explain at least the variations between the other Gospels, because there is a little bit of fruitfulness as to how that evening may have looked like. So Matthew, starting at chapter 26, verse 47, Jesus is arrested. While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd, armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer has arrived, and the signal with them. The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him. Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus replied, "Do what you came for, friend." Then the man stepped forward, seizing Jesus, and arrested him. With that, one of Jesus' companions reached for his sword and drew it out and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Put your sword back in its place, Jesus said to him. For all who drive the sword will die by the sword. Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that says it must happen in this way? In that hour, Jesus said to the crowd, Am I leading a rebellion, that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I sat at the temple courts teaching, and you did not arrest me. But this has all taken place, that the writings of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. In Mark's reading, after the part when it says everyone deserted him and fled, we get this particular verse that stands out. It's Mark chapter 14, starting at verse 51. A young man wearing nothing but linen garments followed Jesus when they seized him, and he fled naked, leaving his garments behind. Kind of interesting that when his disciples fled, a soul kind of stuck around, even took the time to follow Jesus, to see where he's going, and that they took that moment to explain this encounter and the events that happened with Jesus' betrayal, making you wonder who then was that individual. In the Gospel of Mark, some have speculated that perhaps it was the man who was possessed by many demons that Jesus met back when he had crossed the river. He, of course, met the man who had many demons, and instead of the demons just being dispelled from the man, Jesus let them go ahead and occupy the pigs, who went and drowned themselves. That man was so willing to follow Jesus, but he told that man to stay So some speculate that perhaps that man that was mentioned could have been that individual who was once possessed by demons, that he followed Jesus when his disciples couldn't during the time of his arrest. But that's only one speculation. Another possibility actually happens to be in the Gospel of Luke. When they went into the garden and Jesus was praying, the first time, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but your will be done." Luke 22, starting at verse 43. An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, he prayed even more earnestly, and his sweat like drops of blood falling on the ground. Some also speculate that because of Luke's gospel mentioning an angel coming to Jesus during his time of prayer, that very spirit, that very soul, the man in the white robe who followed Jesus, could have been that very same angel. It's hard for us to know for sure the events that have happened, but what is clear is that even though when his disciples deserted him, when his friends did, and even though the crowds took him, there was still company. There were still probably those who we can only imagine and speculate might be willing to still consider following Jesus, even towards that very end. Holy Week is full of wonder, and Maundy Thursday is rich in our Christian theology. So as we prepare to end this time together, I have some questions concerning Maundy Thursday. One, I would like to encourage us to reflect. Considering the Lord's Supper, when has been a time that you have experienced feeling close to God? Those moments that you feel like God is present, even as something as simple as taking the sacraments. Of course, the Last Supper. Have there been times that you feel like, even when things are rough, and you know that you're supposed to be, I'll just put it this way, when you feel like things are rough and that things are falling apart, do you still feel like there have been moments that God's been giving you a nudge saying, "I'm here. You're okay"? When has it been hard sometimes to ask for forgiveness? Whether it be for a friend, a family member, or even just talking to God. What has given you peace in those times? During the garden, we know that Jesus prayed many different types of prayers. And it's very possible that he did pray for his disciples and for us today. Have there been times in which you felt like you can pray, not only for yourself, not only for your friends, but just in general, praying to thank God or glorifying God? And my last question is, what can we do today to show God's gift of forgiveness? What can we do to let people know that God is present with us and God's still working things out, even if we might not know exactly what's happening? Thank you guys so much for your time, and I really hope that this has been helpful. It may not be too much in terms of looking at theology or debates about events that have happened, but it's just interesting to know that things are rich and deep just within the text itself, that we can see all different kinds of truths, but all of them pointing to God's goodness. May the peace and love of Christ be with you all, and I'll see you next week.